Night Vision. Following clues left by our ancestors, we unbury the past to reveal a knowledge of unfathomable value, putting us just a little closer to our own true birthrights. From the secret history of a possible bloodline of Jesus Christ, the secret history of America's founders, to the secret history of extraterrestrial interaction on our planet, here to bring light to the night. Your host for Night Vision Radio, Renee Barnett.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Night Vision. I hope that you're going to enjoy tonight's show. It's going to be pretty heavy duty, but we're also going to try to have a little bit of fun along the way, and you'll see why shortly. But tonight we're going to really dig in to the Oklahoma City bombing, which was, of course, and still is, the biggest domestic terrorist attack on our country. At that time, it was actually the biggest terrorist attack of any kind on our country because, of course, that was before the second World Trade Center attack on 9/11. But there's, of course, I'm from Oklahoma, as many of you know. So that was one that really struck not only every American, but of course everyone that called Oklahoma their home or were born and raised there. And I knew so many people that had something, had lost someone, had someone injured in the blast. And so it was very personal, along with the idea, of course, of just being horrified that we had a terror attack on our own soil. And of course, immediately, the rumors came out that it was a Middle Eastern Islamic terrorist attack. And so early on, I think people were on the lookout for people who might look Middle Eastern, which was a big problem because, of course, we found out later that that was absolutely not the case. Now, my guest tonight was actually there. And I just, by way of reminder, I want to just read a little something from the FBI's website about that day. And then I'm going to introduce my guest and let her pick up from just that moment. I'm not going to read a long time, so don't worry. On the morning of April 19th, 1995, an ex-Army soldier and security guard named Timothy McVeigh parked a rented Ryder truck in front of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in downtown Oklahoma City. He was about to commit mass murder. Inside the vehicle was a powerful bomb made out of a deadly cocktail of agricultural fertilizer, diesel fuel, and other chemicals. McVeigh got out, locked the door, and headed towards his getaway car. He ignited one timed fuse, then another. At precisely 9:02 a.m., the bomb exploded. And with that, I'd like to introduce my guest tonight's former Oklahoma City Councilwoman, Ann Simank, who was there. The bomb went off in her district. She was an elected official who had taken office, if I'm not mistaken, about 1 week before the bomb hit. And I believe that her district lost some 300 businesses that day, along with, of course, the Alfred P. Murrah building and all those lives and countless other injuries. So welcome to the show, Ann. Good to have you.
Oh, thank you, Renee. I'm so glad to be here. It is a hard subject to talk about, but very timely.
It is. It's very timely because, when I saw, the attack on the Capitol, it sort of took me back to the Oklahoma City bombing. It was what was really weird. But for full disclosure, everyone, you guys have often heard me say, anyone who's listened to my show before, that I feel really fortunate in the work that I've done and in the media, radio, and television, because it has allowed me to meet so many really, really interesting people. And my guest tonight, Ann Simank, is someone who I've also met, but I didn't meet her through my work. We actually grew up together. We were born actually 1 week apart. We were delivered by the same doctor. And her mother checked out of the hospital the day my mom checked in. And from that moment, I don't remember a time when I did not know you, Anne, and when we weren't good friends. And boy, did we have a good time together back in the
Oh, yeah.
day. Oh yeah,
Yes.
we had such a good time. But it's funny, I remember when you ran for office and became an Oklahoma City councilwoman. I was like, wow, that was my friend. It was really exciting.
Well,
So,
well,
but
and I felt this. I felt the same way about you, Renee. I mean, wow. And she's on a radio show.
oh, that's so sweet.
And we had a good childhood in a small town in Oklahoma where it was safe, and we didn't worry about these things. Unfortunately, today every city and town needs to be thinking about domestic terrorism. I mean, it can happen, and we know that now.
Well, and later in the show, I want to get into that because you've had some, training and you've done some research into that it could probably be helpful to a lot of people. And I know that sort of set up, a prototype for other cities around the country to respond to not only a terrorist attack, but any kind of disaster,
Right.
which you were able to use in your own next disaster, which was that gigantic Moore,
The F-5.
Oklahoma F5 tornado, which was at that time, I don't know if it still is, but it was the highest winds ever recorded in history. And so,
Well, Renee, you and I grew up in Oklahoma, and we grew up with parents that they took us to the cellar when the tornado came. This tornado, the tornadoes we're used to were small in regard to an F5. This thing was about a mile wide, and it stayed on the ground for over an hour. And
that
that's
was
what
so
was so
crazy.
unusual. I
And
mean,
it
that's
just
a
cut
whole
this
nother
like mile
subject.
wide swath through, Moore and Oklahoma City. It was unbelievable, really
It was.
unbelievable. And we might get into that a little bit too, because that was very interesting how I became involved in that in the Oklahoma tornado. But I left off on the FBI website where they said at precisely 9:02 a.m. the bomb exploded.
It
Tell
was
me about
Wednesday,
that.
April. It was Wednesday, April the 19th, and it was a typical spring day, a little chilly that morning. And I had gotten up. My home and my family and I lived on 20th Street, and the federal building was located on Northwest 5th Street. So I just lived 15 blocks, really, just in front of this building in the downtown area. I had gotten up very early. The children were in high school. They went off to their schools, and I went downtown to have breakfast with the mayor. And I was actually behind the federal building. The impact of that blast, Timothy McVeigh parked the Ryder truck, which was a 24-foot small Ryder truck, but it had 4,500 pounds of explosives in it. And he parked it right at the north face of that building. The building was not set back very far from the street. There was just a little sidewalk and then the door to the building. And the building was 9 stories. It was made out of concrete and glass. It was a pretty ultra-modern looking building, but full of glass on the north side. On the south side of the building, it had beautiful, thick granite walls. And I happened to be with the mayor at a breakfast on the south side of the building. The blast impact went out north, northwest, and northeast in a large V-type impact. So when it went off, I had finished breakfast with the mayor, and I had gone down to my son's school. He was going to a high school in the inner city close to the downtown area. I was about 18 blocks from the blast when it went off, and I had just walked into the school building at 9:02 a.m., and the whole building shook. Some of the glass windows broke, and the children were running out in the halls screaming, "What happened? What happened?" I immediately left and told, it was chaos immediately. And I knew that a building had come down in my city. I just knew it. You feel the impact of that blast. They said they felt it 30 miles north of Oklahoma City in Guthrie, Oklahoma. And I think that's called a blast concussion. And
Right.
it's you had asked me once if it felt like an earthquake. Well, it really didn't. It didn't feel like an earthquake. The concussion hits you in your body, in your chest. You feel it hit your heart, your chest. Some of the people that weren't in the federal building were typically, were blown up in the air from that concussion of the blast. They were blown several feet in the air and injured from flying through the air and then falling down to the concrete in the city. But I drove back to the city because I knew some building had come down, and quickly found the mayor again at City Hall, and he said we could see, because City Hall was just a couple of blocks away, and we ran over there on foot and stood at the crater. It created a crater that was deep. There were approximately, I don't know, they said about 85 cars that were on fire. There were people walking wounded, just running out of the building, around the building, down the street. People that were driving to work that day had just vacated their cars, and they were running out in the street, not very disorganized, and their thoughts were very confused and didn't know what had happened. They just saw a bright light, they said. Things were on fire downtown. So the first emergency crews that came were putting out fires and then trying to also get into this building. When it collapsed, the first 2 floors were blown backward. The bomb blew out north 1/3 of the building, and the impact went north, but those first 2 floors went backward through the granite wall. And then the other floors, the 7 floors above floor 1 and floor 2, rose up and did a pancake and just toppled down into the rubble. So people were alive and went up with their desks and then came down. And people were trapped. There wasn't a lot of, like in an earthquake, you'll have pockets where maybe you can find people. There weren't a lot of pockets because of that pancake effect.
Right.
And then, of course, the first 2 floors, those people were just blown through a granite wall.
So at that point, when you got there, it was mainly firefighters on the scene trying to put the fires out.
It was Station 1 and Station 5, and those stations are both located downtown. I knew a lot of those firefighters, Renee, because in my election, you had mentioned in your introduction, I had just won my city council election 8 days earlier. I had been sworn into office. And during the campaign, I met numerous firefighters. Public safety endorsed me, and I've always been, a big public safety supporter. So I got to know many of our policemen by name and firefighters by name, and so they were there, and I felt like I needed to give them support and moral support throughout this thing.
Now, let me ask you this. Sorry to interrupt you, but I know your background. I know you're, a trained social worker. That was your profession when you became elected, and then you continued with that type of work too. So how did that, or did that kind of training sort of just kick in? How did you not just totally lose it right then and there?
Well, it really did kick in. And because actually the city manager and the mayor both asked me to put on my social worker hat. And the minute of that bombing, I put on my social worker hat. And you were there of the F5 tornado. I did the same thing.
Yes.
The mayor had asked me to be in charge of the mental health and help organize that. And we'd have those daily briefings on mental health. But I did have to do social work, yes, with my constituency. Because this bomb, we had terrible loss of lives, and families lost their loved ones, but we also had citizens that were just traumatized. Our mental health centers received over 8,000 phone calls like that day for help. people that were just scared and needing help, just citizens that were so terrorized by this horrible person that would blow up our buildings and kill people and maim and injure. And that's the other thing. There were a lot of injuries. You mentioned the buildings, the businesses, over 300 businesses. But we had 2 deaths in a building across the street, the Water Resources Board. 2 people died that morning in that building. A homeless man that was in an alley died that morning from that blast. There were other injuries and deaths all over Oklahoma City, not just the ones inside the federal building.
Oh. And of course, we know that there was that daycare center inside. To me, I guess you knew that, right? When you arrived on the scene, you already were familiar that there was a daycare center in there. And
yes, we all knew that, and that was our very first thought, is to get to the children. They're on floor 2. It was called America's Kids.
Right.
America's Kids Daycare Center. 19 children died that morning. Little children, precious babies. People, and I think only 6 or 7 survived. Those children are grown today. And I visited most of those children, the 3 of them at least, of the 6 survivors, while they were in the hospital. They had serious injuries and burns. And I believe one little boy had a lot of metal and, glass that had really injured his head. So he was very serious. And then some of them had terrible, terrible 3rd-degree burns, 1st-degree, 3rd-degree burns, and in the burn centers from that explosive.
Gosh.
So,
and we all remember that iconic photograph of that Oklahoma City firefighter carrying that little...
Her name was Bailey, Bailey Allman. And Bailey was about a year old. She was alive when the firefighter's picture was taken with her, and she later died at the hospital. But their family lived about a half a block from the federal building in a high-rise apartment building that was, I think it had 400 units in it. And that building was totally destroyed, and all of those people, that residents of that building, were vacated that very day. I mean, it blew their kitchens, cabinets off the wall. It blew their toilets apart. It destroyed everything, structural damage in that apartment building. So the Red Cross put those people in housing for 6 months or 9 months until that apartment building was rebuilt. And Bailey's family decided to go back and live there. And they invited me there later to visit with them and talk about little Bailey. They missed her. They had saved a lot of her baby clothes and things. It was hard on everybody for months. I mean, this just happens in 1 second, but the ramifications last with you for years.
I can't imagine, all the first responders and the things that they, had to deal with on that day.
Well, and like we said, they made the daycare center a first priority. They were looking for those children. Of course, they were looking for anyone that was alive, but they were very aware that the daycare center was there. There was also a daycare center right across the street at the YMCA. And children were injured and hit with glass, and a lot of the injuries were glass injuries in those buildings that were a little distance from the federal building. But those children were highly traumatized too. But we did not have any deaths with the Y's daycare center, thank heaven.
Yeah.
The federal building had numerous agencies in it, and it had about 600 people that worked in it that were either federal employees or contract workers. And on any given day, there were usually about 200 visitors in there at various places, because HUD was in there, and that was a big agency. And
wasn't OSBI? Wasn't Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation there?
No, but the Secret Service was in there, the DEA.
Oh, Secret Service, yeah.
And the ATF was in there. and also the U.S. Army was in there. That's kind of interesting since McVeigh left the U.S. Army, and
Right.
and so they had.
I heard that he was sort of disgruntled because he wasn't accepted in his special forces, and so it sort of
Right.
turned him against the army and thus the government. Was that
Maybe
sort of
that was
where he started with his?
the beginning.
Yeah, yeah.
The beginning. But yes, it had the AFT and the DEA and Secret Service, but the biggest agency I think in there was Social Security, which has a lot of visitors. And we had a girl from our hometown that was in the Social Security office that day, Pam Largo, and she died.
Wow.
I don't know if you knew her, but her parents lived in Whitefield.
Oh, I did hear that. Yeah, but no, I didn't know her. Now, while all this was going on, it was, I imagine just a swirl of activity with, the rescues going on, the fires being put out, other people as yourself trying to deal with, people's emotional states of mind and whatever else, you might be able to lend a hand to. There was so much going on. And while that was happening, Timothy McVeigh was leaving Oklahoma City
Right.
in his car.
He had apparently been in Oklahoma City, they said, a week or so prior to the bombing, and had placed a getaway car, a couple of blocks, maybe a little further than a couple of blocks, but kind of in a vacated parking area. And he had put a note on that car, I'm having car trouble. Please don't tow my car. I'll be back to get it in a day or something.
Right.
And the car, because he had become so radicalized after his, bad experience, he thought, with the Army, and a couple of other things that I think you're aware of, the Waco incident and
Ruby Ridge, yeah.
He had become very radicalized, and he wouldn't buy a car tag. He's one of those that wouldn't buy a car tag, and he jumps in that car and drives out of Oklahoma City to escape and go north, and he didn't get probably over 70 miles north of Oklahoma City before an Oklahoma Highway Patrol arrested him for not having a car tag.
What a dope.
Love it.
Oh, my
gosh. You commit mass murder, but you won't buy a car tag. It's,
to get away, yeah.
It's not very logical. So he was arrested and he was jailed in a little bitty town in northern Oklahoma called Perry, Oklahoma. They really didn't know who they had, but they had him in their jail. So,
and then what happened? How did they find out?
Well, when a terrorist bomb like this happens, a domestic terrorist bomb in your city, your local responders are the first on the scene. Your feds aren't going to get there. Our federal help didn't come until about 1 a.m. the next morning.
Wow.
So your local city is going to have to take care of everything. It could be up to even 48 hours, they say, before federal help gets there. And so when it's a crime scene, it's different from our hurricanes and it's different from our earthquakes because this is actually a crime scene. And the FBI is the lead agency for the crime scene. So Oklahoma City Fire was in charge throughout this whole recovery and rescue, but the FBI was in charge of the crime scene and collecting the evidence for that. And the FBI immediately went into their sources, and they were able to find the FBI found the axle to the Ryder truck, and it had been blown down the street right in front of that apartment complex I was talking about. They found the axle, which had the VIN number on it. They were able to trace the Ryder truck to Kansas, and the FBI were able to immediately interview the people in Kansas who described Timothy McVeigh, and an artist did a sketch. So at that point, we had a sketch of this man.
So was that the first time people knew that they were looking for a Caucasian guy?
Yes, and someone from our own country, because we had spent the whole morning looking for the Mideasterners.
Gosh. Well, the amazing thing was I've seen that sketch. I mean, you can find it. You can certainly find it on the FBI website about the Oklahoma City bombing, and that really did look like him. Some composite sketches that you see, they don't even really resemble, and you can kind of see why. I mean, someone's just describing the person, but that sketch was really good, and I guess once those Perry officers saw that, they probably thought, "Wait a minute, we've got a guy that looks just like that."
Well, and they're in a small town, and they've got the bomber. I think they were absolutely flipped out. But FBI was very quick to get to Perry, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma City had a large FBI office. They were not located in the federal building, thank heaven. They actually had been located in another high-rise building further out from the downtown area. So that FBI office was quick to get there. They didn't have to come from out of state like the other feds do when you have this sort of incident. But, all of this chaos is going on that morning, and I'm at the bomb site. I'm with the mayor and a couple of other city council members, and there's fire all around us. You can see cars where people were driving to work and they just jumped out of their car, or they were blown out of their car. One car had a car door open and the hatchback was up, and there was a bra hanging on it. It blew people's clothes off of their bodies. That's so strange. But so that's going on, and the Red Cross was calling for help for people that had the social work degree. I had finished my master's at OU, and I told the city manager and the mayor I needed to go to the Red Cross. So I left that afternoon, left the bomb site, and went over to the Red Cross and helped a couple of people that were in there searching for their loved ones, their spouses. There was total confusion because people were being picked up by volunteers. People just on the street would put someone that's injured in their car, drive them to a hospital. So family members did not know where their family, where the victims were. It was very confusing. Red Cross became a center that we could try to find out and help people locate their loved ones, to find out what major hospital they had been taken to. Communications went down that morning, Renee. That's another really important thing when you have a terrorist act in your city or a major catastrophe. It could happen with hurricanes or earthquakes too, but our cellular phones were overloaded, and so we couldn't use our phones until we got extra mobile type circuits up there from Dallas, Texas, and that took about 3 or 4 hours to get those up, to give us some communication. In the meantime, we had our police officers running around all the different area hospitals in Oklahoma City, and there's several large hospitals plus the medical center, and they're trying to find out how many beds they have open and get that back down to the bomb site so they can tell when we're triaging people. In the street became the medical center, just Fifth Street. We laid them out on the street in a triage situation. We'd know which hospital to put them in, what pickup truck to get them there. It was utter chaos on the streets.
I wonder what you were thinking when I don't remember if it was during the Capitol siege or after that we learned that there were bombs placed outside the Republican National Headquarters and the Democratic National Headquarters. Did that bring it all back?
It did. It was hard for me to watch, and it brought tears to my eyes. It's hard to watch that sort of terrorist action in play at our nation's capital and not think about the hurt and and just to see our police officers and see him scream when he was being crushed in that door just hurt me so badly. And it's hard because our rescue workers and our police officers try so hard to help people when they need help. You know, we had so many attempted suicides in fire and police. Our police and fire chaplains say that they have probably intervened in over 100 attempted suicides. We did have one police officer that was a hero. He was first on the scene that morning with his good friend and partner, and they pulled people from that building alive. And he was going to get the police Medal of Valor one evening and be recognized, and he didn't show up because he took his gun and killed himself. He couldn't handle what he had seen. It was hard for those rescue workers. It was hard for the whole community. And when I saw that happening at our nation's capital and how our police officers at the nation's capital were so overwhelmed with a out of control mob, it just really brought that back.
It was heart-wrenching to see because, I mean, they were just so massively outnumbered. And
right.
You saw them still trying, and it was just so... Now, I saw tonight that they gave the one officer, oh my gosh, Officer Goodman, the Congressional Medal or something like that, and honored him. And then they also talked about the other officers because... he did do some amazing things, but he certainly wasn't alone. His colleagues were right there with him. But, I mean, it's amazing. And all they were doing was their jobs and trying to protect what they were supposed to, protect the Capitol and protect the human beings inside it. So it was really disheartening to see them being beaten with flagpoles and hockey sticks and
baseball bats.
Yeah, it really didn't make any sense to me. It was all like the Twilight Zone. But
it's so interesting because Terry Nichols and
Timothy
McVeigh were kind of just in a little cell themselves. Maybe a friend or two knew about it, and it has evolved now into just a massive group of people that were violent.
Right. But he wasn't, I mean, I do know they refer to him, even on the FBI website, I think they still refer to him as a lone wolf. Well, he wasn't a lone wolf. I mean, certainly it wasn't a very big team, but we also know that he was connected and had been communicating with other extremist groups. I know they did some investigation into his connections with LOM City. And for people that may or may not know, LOM City is sort of a town. I don't think it's incorporated, though. But it's this not. Community that's set up in eastern Oklahoma, and it's a survivalist community. And it's, you don't go out there, if you don't want to get shot or you don't, many years, I don't think very many outsiders even knew about it. I think it sort of came into the public consciousness during the Oklahoma City bombing because of Timothy McVeigh's calls to there and his connections with certain figures. And I read recently that there were people there. I don't know, whether it's the truth or not. So I'll qualify that. But that there were people at LOM City that did report that Timothy McVeigh was there, had visited there. Do you know anything about that?
I don't. I have heard that too, that he was there. But I do think his phone calls were verified by the FBI.
Right.
That he did have phone contact at least with them. And I think Terry Nichols also knew people there. That was a cell. That's a cell of militant, radicalized people that do not want to have anything to do with the government. They hate the government. And I think they also, Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols also found like people in Michigan too. They little cells like that. So
I think that in a way, it seems like that's sort of how some people get, sort of sucked into that, is because, I mean, everybody's dissatisfied with some aspect of the government all the time. And
right.
it's like, they sort of get played because of their dissatisfaction. And then they feel like they found a community. And then it just becomes a little more radical, a little more weird, and a little more conspiratorial, a little more paranoid. But by that time, they've kind of already been groomed into that. And I mean, I just don't know. I mean, I find it hard to kind of understand that.
I think that a lot of these people, just like McVeigh, had an emotionality involved. He was emotional about Waco. He was emotional about not making it in the special forces. And they don't listen to logic or facts. And so these types of cells, or joining with other people, give them answers, makes them feel accepted or good, because they're basing their anger and everything on their emotions. They're angry at the government. It's all emotional to them. They need an answer. Well, the answer is, let's go bomb that building. That'll make me feel better.
And am I remembering this wrong, or did Timothy McVeigh give some indication that he deliberately, one of the reasons he chose that building was because there was a daycare center there, because he felt like children were killed at Waco, so somehow
children needed to die.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he actually said that, but we have always heard that he selected, that was discussed, that the daycare, that the federal building was selected because it housed America's kids.
And they had been in there. I mean, we do know that, right? They had been inside.
They had walked through, actually, the second floor where the daycare center was located. Yes, they had walked through the halls of America's kids.
Was that just before, or?
I'm not sure how. I'm not sure about that. I really don't know. I don't know if it was a month or 6 months or a week.
Right.
I don't think it was a week before, but I do know they brought the car.
Well, if it had been like anything other than that week before, then that's definitely an indication that this had been in the planning for a long, long time.
I think that the Oklahoma City Federal Building had probably been discussed for a long, long time.
And that, again, was the supposed connection with LOM City, because there had been talk there of blowing up federal buildings.
And they had mentioned several years prior to 1995, LOM City had talked about the Oklahoma City Federal Building.
Yeah, along with maybe another city or two.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it was. I think there's probably a few more people involved in this, but we just won't know now.
Well, there was that third guy. Was it Michael Fournier?
Michael Fournier. He lived in Arizona, and he and his wife knew that this was going to happen. They could have prevented it, Renee. I always think of that. They knew prior to the bombing what Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols were mixing an explosive, and that they were going to take it in a Ryder truck and they were going to blow up Oklahoma City's building. And they kept their mouths shut. They testified at the trials, and they were given a lenient sentence. And I believe now they're in a federal witness program. They could be living anywhere in America.
Well, now they have to be protected from their own compadres.
Probably so.
I'm sure. Well,
Probably
yeah,
so.
I bet. Oh, goodness gracious. So, okay, that was the day of. And then how did, how did that rest of that short time period, that week, then, okay, you found obviously who the main perpetrator was, Timothy McVeigh. He was locked up already. Many people were in the hospital. I would imagine many funerals were being planned.
Well, what we did, what happened that very first day is that we focused on finding every survivor we could in that building. And the firefighters worked hard. The building was in such terrible condition, being made out of concrete and big concrete slabs and glass. The concrete building that didn't fall down in the pancake was big, giant. They call them mother slabs, hanging by rebar. And it was very, very dangerous. We had a nurse that came to help. She was a volunteer. She ran into the building, and a large piece of concrete hit her on the head, and she died later. So many of these firefighters, the first thing we had to do was to get architects and engineers there, public works people to shut off gas and shut off water, and get those people in there to help shore up that building and make it safe. We had to actually empty that whole building bucket by bucket. They used 5-gallon buckets, and they used a human chain of rescue workers. And we worked 12-hour shifts, 24/7, till we took that building down. And everything had to come out in a bucket. Trying to find survivors that first day. We didn't find any survivors after the very
And also,
first day.
I would imagine you had to take it out in buckets, unfortunately, to get all the human remains.
Get the human remains out of the respect for the families that have lost their loved ones, and also because it was a crime scene. So every bucket had to go through these giant sifters that we brought in to look for pieces of evidence. And that's the thing. When you have this sort of terrorism, it's not just the catastrophe of a building being blown down. It is a crime scene, and you've got to rope off and keep people out of that perimeter and make sure that every bit of evidence is collected to help you prove that case in court and convict those people, bring them to justice for doing the mass murder. And so that was the purpose of sifting bucket by bucket, as well as the building wasn't secure, Renee, and the firefighters and rescue workers were afraid that, those concrete pieces were dangling just by steel rebar. So they tried to secure them as well as they could, but the mother slab was always scary.
Wow.
They were afraid to work under that mother. They called it the mother slab, and then the daycare center was called the pit.
Wow.
Because it was just a pit.
It was really one of the hardest hit
survivor,
areas.
The last survivor, we got out before the federal teams ever arrived. There was no one that survived after that first day. About 10 o'clock that night, the last survivor was found.
Really?
And
from what floor was that?
Well, the floors weren't there. See, everything was down in a pile.
It was just a pile.
I don't know what. I think she had been in the Social Security office, which would have been the first floor. But her leg was trapped under a concrete slab, and she was laying in about 6 inches of water and getting hypothermia. It was springtime, and of course, windy in Oklahoma, the Oklahoma wind, and there was a wind chill factor. And she had been, she was severely injured. She had been in Social Security with her 2 little children and her mother and her sister. And her little baby was 4 months old, so she was trying to get a Social Security number for her baby. And a couple of the doctors from one of the hospitals came in, and the firefighters couldn't bring her out of the building because that heavy slab, they couldn't lift it, and it had her leg trapped under there. And she was begging them to get her out. So they told her they couldn't move that concrete. The whole rest of the stuff would collapse and probably kill all of them, that they were going to have to amputate her leg. And Dr. Andy Sullivan took a scalpel and he ruined, I think, 2 or 3 blades because it kept hitting the concrete. But he cut her leg off. He amputated her leg without any anesthetic.
Oh, my God.
And when that last scalpel blade was ruined, he took his pocket knife to finish the job. And they got Dana out of there that night.
Oh, my goodness.
Her mother and her 2 children were dead, and her sister was severely injured but lived. And she lived. Wow. That's just one story, you know. And that's just the evil that this man did to our citizens.
I'm just speechless. What a story that is. But, you know, I do recall that story. Of course, I didn't know the detail that you just gave, but I do remember the one lady having to have her leg amputated in order to be freed. And it did save her life in the end. I didn't realize, I don't think, or at least I didn't remember. It's been so long ago. And probably a lot of these things I've pushed back as well because they're not pleasant.
Right.
But I didn't remember that she had lost her children.
Yes, she lost her children. She lost her mother. And at first, when they told her they'd have to amputate her leg to get her out of there alive, she didn't want that. She said, no. She was just 20 years old, Renee.
Wow.
And she said no. And then there was a second bomb scare at that building. And they called all the rescue workers out. Everybody ran out. And when they got back in there, she said, I don't want to die here. That made her decide, you know, that she would go through with the amputation. I don't want to die here.
I hope she's doing well. Oh, my goodness. I hope she's fine. What a thing to have to deal with for the rest of your life. And, you know, not only to lose all those loved ones and to go through the trauma, but also to basically have to relearn, you know, everything. And as far as, you know, getting around and just kind of starting a new life over again with all that tragedy hanging over you. So I hope she's fine. I hope she's been able to overcome it and
I do too.
And have a good and happy life.
You know, we're over 25 years out from this, and I
That's
understand
amazing.
from talking to friends at City Hall, we still have people that are experiencing PTSD and seeking help. And that's what, you know, cities and towns need to know, that not only are you dealing with a crime scene and you've got all of this rescue and recovery, but your medical personnel and your mental health people are so important, and they can't be left out of this. That's part of that incident command center stuff. You know, you saw that in action.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that was one of the good things that came out of it, was you were able to develop a much better response to situations like that and others, like natural disasters, like we were talking about, like the big F5 tornado. I'll just tell that story real quick before we go to break. And when we come back, I think we're going to have another person. You don't even know this, Ann, but another person contacted me on Facebook today, and she had a couple little anecdotes. She's from Oklahoma, and she had a couple of little anecdotes that she wanted to share about that day. Just some kind of strange and coincidental things that happened to her and her family. But with the F5 tornado, I remember, what year was that? Is that 98, 99, 98?
99, wasn't it?
Was it? Anyway, I know I was working at a production company here in Los Angeles, and I was working on a Fox special for, you know, Fox Network. And one guy, you know, comes running into my office and say, oh, no, it was the boss. He comes in and says, "You're from Oklahoma. Go home. We're going to send you someone's going to pick you up in half an hour, and you're headed to the airport. We need for you to go get some footage on the big tornado in Oklahoma City. And it was actually for another show that I wasn't even working on. It was a Discovery Channel show called Wild Rescues. And so it was my job to go there and find animal stories, from the storm. And so I did just that. I ran home. I threw some stuff in a bag. And I guess at some point I must have called you because, of course, little did they know that my good friend was city councilwoman in Oklahoma City. So I called you and you said, oh, yeah, come out to the big emergency response center and everything. And so I went out there and, man, that thing was like Star Trek going on out there. It was the command center. And It was in a church, wasn't it?
The Incident Command Center.
Was that in a church out there? Or was it just a building?
I think it was a great big building with a big parking lot.
And there was a big open room where everything was set up. All the police and fire and...
We'd have briefings there every day. And
Yeah. And so that's where I got some, interviews with people that were on the scene. I got to go out and get some footage of the damages. And in fact, because of that, because I was with you, I was able to get the first footage of the damage in Oklahoma City out nationally. And it was posted on the Discovery Channel website. And then it was great. I couldn't believe it. Yeah, they took away a Time magazine reporter right next to me because he didn't have the proper credentials. It was so funny. I felt bad. But the weird thing was, and then I found this story of this dog who had saved this couple's life, basically. They got in the bathtub when the tornado was hitting. The dog got into the bathtub and laid over them, and their place got hit, and a gigantic shard of glass embedded itself into the back of that dog. And they took the dog, they were carrying the dog, and, there was no way to get out of there. And some neighbor managed to get the dog in the back of his truck and took him to a vet, and where they did surgery on him and saved his life. And I was able to get to the vet office and get footage of the young couple coming to see their dog that they hadn't seen since he saved their lives. Oh, it was just so sweet.
Oh, my God.
The dog was such a big black dog. I don't even know what kind it was. Probably some mutt. He was just wonderful. I think his name was Derringer or something like that. And anyway, but that was a great story that I was able to get. And then I went out to the animal shelter out there and got stories about other animals and fell in love with a baby pig out there.
They were busy. They were very busy, weren't
they?
Because
gosh.
All the animals were displaced. Now, a lot of the animals that lost their lives, though, I don't know if you got on that story, but that tornado had been on the ground in Chickasha, Oklahoma, about, an hour south of Oklahoma City, and it had picked up some lady's cattle. So it carried all of those cows and horses with it until it dropped them in Oklahoma City.
Were they all dead?
Yes. It was terrible. It was terrible, but our animal welfare shelter workers were so busy because people had lost their pets and animals were missing, and not just people during that storm. And another funny thing, a lot of people were in their cars during that storm, and I told friends of mine in Florida about this. Florida, we have hurricanes, but sometimes they have tornadoes down here too. Mm-hmm. And what people think that, you shouldn't be out in your car, so they pulled up under these bridges, these overpasses, and they feel safe under there. But that's the worst place you can go because the tornado just actually sucks the cars or the people right out from under those bridges. Ugh. And we lost some people, that were doing that. So tell people, don't park your car under a bridge if you're on the highway. You're supposed to get out of your car and get into the lowest area you can. Get into a ditch. But don't go up under.
And don't try to outrun it with your car.
Right.
And
we've had storm chasers, that try to outrun them and get caught.
Well, no, what we were always told was if you're in your car, and a tornado's coming, you sort of drive toward it, but off to an angle, because you're not going to outrun it. But if you're driving toward it, you can see where it is, and you just head off to the side instead of trying to, let it chase you. I don't know, but I can tell you right now that was one big reason why I did not mind leaving Oklahoma, because some of my scary childhood memories were being yanked out of my bed in the middle of the night and running either through my own backyard or across the street to our neighbors across the street to the storm cellar. Oh,
I have the very same memories, I'll tell you. And we would run in the rainstorms and get in that cellar.
Yeah, I used to have so many nightmares about tornadoes, but once I moved to California, I didn't have them anymore. And it's funny, but earthquakes, although I don't like them, haven't had that same horrifying effect. Maybe it's because of the childhood trauma of the tornadoes, but it was really, really bad. But anyhow, I guess we're going to take a break here in just a moment. Before we do that, I kind of want to mention, too, next week, we're going to have back Dr. James Martin, our old pal, our old font of knowledge. And we're going to be looking into our family trees. We're going to be looking into genealogy. And so, you might want to, if you're planning on joining us on that show, you might want to drag out the family Bible and get a few names and dates together, because one person who's listening that night will have the opportunity to have a private session with Dr. Martin on their own family tree and family genealogy. And you will be amazed at what he can come up with in a half an hour or an hour about your family. So I don't want anybody to miss out on that opportunity. So we'll be talking with him next week. And we will be continuing tonight's program on Night Vision right here on the Oklahoma City bombing with former Oklahoma City Councilwoman Ann Simank. We will be back in just a few moments.
By our ancestors, we unbury the past to reveal a knowledge of unfathomable value, putting us just a little closer to our own.
Hi, folks. It's troubling times, and fear is pushing emotions, which in turn pushes health the wrong direction. Do you ever get an ache because life is uneasy? Try Life Change Tea at GetTheTea.com. Life Change Tea works on your digestive tract, helping to move food through quicker and comfortably so your health is spot on. Life Change Tea may not help with world issues, but it will help with your digestive issues. A glass a day helps keep the intruders away. So, change your life today. Log on to GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. If your health game is off, get on by ordering Life Change Tea. GetTheTea.com. And while you're on our site, look around at the great non-GMO organic supplements. And if you're a sales shopper, go to our specials page and see what's for you. I've been drinking the tea for 12 years, and I'm sure glad for its health benefits. Again, that's GetTheTea.com. GetTheTea.com. The tea that makes you go. Please listen. Now is not the time to fear. When your immune system is strong, shields up. You have very little worries. If your immune system is compromised, you're susceptible to all viruses. I say shields up and no fear. Try Heart Love from GetTheTea.com. Heart Love has a special ingredient called allicin. It comes from the healing part of the garlic plant. No garlic breath, no garlic leaking out your pores, just pure immune-building ingredients that gets your shields up. Heart Love is a unique blend of herbs that loves to build you up. Google garlic and know the benefits. One Heart Love pill is equal to 20 cloves of garlic. 20 cloves. Shields up. You've heard of our Life Change Cleansing Tea at GetTheTea.com. Now try Heart Love. And by the way, take your blood pressure and watch weekly what happens. So here's how to purchase. Log on to GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. And build your shields. That's GetTheTea.com. Mention Ray in the coupon code and hit apply and receive free shipping.
A birthday without her mom. An anniversary without her husband. Her wedding day without her dad. These are the days when military families feel it most of all. The loss of their soldier, their sailor, their airman, their Marine, their Coast Guardsman. Families never forget their loved ones lost to war or illness or suicide. Families never forget, and neither do we. We are TAPS, the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. We provide resources, support, and comfort to heal the hearts and meet the needs of grieving military families, all at no cost to them. Your generosity can make an enormous difference in the lives of the families of our fallen military heroes. Our military families need to know they are not alone and they are not forgotten. Show them your support at taps.org.
Welcome to the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. Here you'll find great new content, including the KGRA Classics, great shows from our archives. You'll be able to see the show times and information so you can see what show is currently on air. The on-air live button, so just go to this section and you'll be able to hear the show live with exceptional sound quality. We also have the Vault section. Make sure to subscribe to get access to great content and special features. We have the make content for our latest news and events, so make sure to sign up and you can be part of our forum. So make sure to check out the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. We look forward to seeing you there, and we hope that you enjoy the new website.
Mainstream media's most wanted. KGRAradio.com.
Night Vision. Following clues.
Welcome back to Night Vision. I am your host, Renee Barnett. If you're just joining us, we're talking with former Oklahoma City Councilwoman Ann Simank, and also my childhood friend and my current friend. And also, we got another person joining us. We're talking about the Oklahoma City bombing. Coincidentally, we got into the F5 tornado, and we have someone that's going to join us now, another person from Oklahoma, another person from my childhood, a kind of an interesting story there. But she has a couple of interesting Oklahoma City bombing personal stories to tell about that day. And also, she says now that she has something really interesting about the F5 tornado. So I am going to introduce her by way of explaining that her name is Katherine Wheelus Dannels, and she lives in the Atlanta area, although she grew up in Oklahoma. Now, I have to say, every year, I used to go to summer camp, to church camp at Kaimishi Baptist Assembly down near Tallahena, Oklahoma. And one summer, I remember these girls kept coming up to me and they would call me by name, which actually my first name is Kathy. And my middle name is Renee, but as I grew up, I started going by Renee. But back then I was Kathy Barnett. And these girls would come up and they would say my name, Kathy, but they would talk to me about things I knew nothing about. Well, we finally figured out that they thought I was someone else. And they said, you look just like this girl named Kathy Wheelus. And I was going, really? And so Kathy's mother was actually one of the chaperones or teachers there at the camp from her town. And a couple of the girls from my town went up to her and showed her a picture of me. And she said, when was this picture taken? And they said, that's not your daughter. And she said, that is my daughter. And they said, no, it's not. And funny enough, I never met Kathy in person to this very day. But for some reason, one day I started thinking about that. That's just something that kind of stuck in the back of my mind, that I had this doppelganger running around. And so I looked on Facebook and I found her, and we've been communicating now for about a year. So it's so funny that when she saw the show about the Oklahoma City bombing, she contacted me and said, hey, I got a couple little stories to tell. So I would like to welcome Katherine Wheelus Dannels. Hi, Katherine.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm doing
So
really good.
first, since we've been getting into the tornado stuff, why don't you start with that? You had something that happened with the F5 tornado?
Well, it wasn't that something happened specifically with that tornado, but like you, I grew up in tornado towns, and we were always very concerned about tornadoes. And my husband grew up in Kansas, and the whole 9 yards about Kansas and tornadoes and all of that kind of stuff. It wasn't until 1991, while we were living in Georgia, that either of us got hit by a tornado.
Oh my gosh!
We
never
had tornadoes, never in Oklahoma or Kansas. But in 1991, we got hit by a tornado here where we are in Georgia, and there was actually two tornadoes that came through, and we had like $30,000 of damage to our house, and we had a 200-year-old red oak tree on the west side of our house, and the tornado got down inside the tree, and it twisted it, and it went north. We lost 13 trees that day, but all of them went in the direction from Birmingham towards Atlanta, except for the big tree, which went north, because if it had hit the house, it would have killed all of us. So, but we always just marveled at this whole thing. Just like my other stories about the bombing, we just missed.
It was a just miss. That's right. Now,
but never in our hometown. Never.
Now, what's very weird is, your mother was in the hospital in Oklahoma City at that time,
right.
And so, talk about that and how that came into play.
Well, Mom had, I think it was hip replacement surgery. She had been in the hospital for several weeks in rehab. And the day that this happened, my neighbor said, there's been a terrorist attack in Oklahoma City. And that was the day that Mother was supposed to be released from the hospital. And of course, I went into immediate panic. Oh my goodness, how they're going to be in the hospital, and they're going to be bringing people to the hospital, and she won't be released. Just a million different things went through my head, and so I got on the phone, and I don't really think she had a cell phone, but my brother lived in the Oklahoma City area. He could have been picking her up. I kind of didn't think that Daddy would be, because Daddy hated driving in any city. And I called, and she was home. And I said, wait a minute, you're supposed to be at the hospital getting released sometime today. She said, well, the doctor came in yesterday afternoon. It was sunny, because the day, if y'all remember the day of the bombing, it was raining, it was storming, and everything that just added to the chaos that was going on. And the doctor came in and said, would you like to go home today? And she said, sure. And Daddy got out of the city in 15 minutes, and she was home. And but she talked to the staff of the hospital. The hospital was only like 6 or 7 blocks from the building. So it was right there in the middle of it, and the whole hospital shook, and the glass was shook and cracked and so forth and so on. So if she had not got to go home a day early, she would have been in the hospital when everything was going on.
That is so wild. But even weirder than that, talk about when you had to move some items.
Well,
and when
my
was
father-in-law, well, just a few days before the bombing, my father-in-law and his girlfriend was a very wealthy lady, and she had places all over the country, and she had a place in Florida, and she was moving stuff from her place in Florida to this great big huge house that she had built in Olmsburg, Kansas, which is just across the border. And so they moved, he was helping her move the stuff from Nokomis, Florida to Olmsburg in a Ryder truck. And I thought that they turned it into Nebraska, but Kansas, Nebraska, wherever, it turned out that it was the truck that Timothy McVeigh rented.
And can you believe that?
How very, very strange. And what's
but,
funny is I'm in Nokomis, Florida.
Oh yeah. Well, if you know the FBI interviewed them and they got completely questions and everything about the whole deal. But yeah, when we talked to him, he's like, "You were driving the van."
Oh my gosh.
So strange. You were mentioning your mom had been in the hospital that was close to downtown. We have hospitals all over that city, and people were taken to all these numerous different hospitals. But that hospital was probably St. Anthony's. That's the name of the one that's about 5 blocks from the building. And,
yep, that sounds like it.
And, St. Anthony, of course, was just full of patients that were injured. That blast hit a 48 square block area of Oklahoma City, so there were a lot of injuries in other buildings, and a lot of those injuries were glass injuries. People were in their offices when glass windows were blown out on top of them. So St. Anthony was just absolutely crowded. It's really good. Your mom was discharged early because I went to St. Anthony with a gentleman I was helping through the Red Cross that very day of the bomb, and I took him to St. Anthony's to try to find his wife, and it was total chaos. They were writing people's names down on butcher block paper and taping it up on walls to try to let you know if that patient had been admitted or not. There were so many, just crowds and crowds of people. You couldn't even have parked your car in that area. It would have been horrible to have to get your mom out of there on that very day. It was so crowded.
And being a visual person, that's all what went through my head. And honestly, one of them would have had a heart attack before they got out of the hospital if they had been there through all of that. It's obviously something that we all remember. It's a lot like the way we felt with 9/11, because
sure,
you remember every single little detail forever. And I'm not a believer necessarily, and I told Renee this earlier, I don't necessarily condone capital punishment, but with Timothy McVeigh, I had other feelings because the families needed closure. And listening to you, it sounds like they specifically were going after that daycare, and that's just horrendous to go after.
Well,
children.
We lost 19 children were killed that day. 19 babies. They were 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds, and their parents. 30 children became orphans that day that lost parents that died in the building. Just horrible what he did. And terrorism, I don't know, cities and towns need to be prepared. Domestic preparedness is something that I'm really interested in, and I worked hard to do. But, you have to coordinate with the federal government. I do want to say, Renee, that our USAR teams, the FEMA trains USAR teams, that's urban search and rescue teams. And the first 2 teams to come help Oklahoma City, it was Phoenix, Arizona, and Sacramento, California. And then later Los Angeles came. USAR team came to help us. And also, for your producer, Bill, we had USAR teams from New York City come help us. So New York and California were really big in the Oklahoma City bombing and lending their experienced rescue people.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yes, it is.
And now I know you ended up, speaking before United States Congress more than once. What was that all about?
Well, that was really about after this had happened in Oklahoma City. We're looking back at lessons learned. What did we do right? What did we do wrong? How could we have done anything better? And then how was it working with the federal government? Because the federal government comes in. And so state and local plans, need to be coordinated with the federal people, because they will eventually get there. And your city and town, need training to get the expertise to handle the catastrophe, because typically they're not going to get there very fast. It's going to take them a day or so. But I I got involved with public safety, and I had always been a supporter of fire and police. So I was asked to chair this National League of Cities Public Safety and Crime Prevention Committee at the national level. And that's how I was invited to testify, also because I had been involved as the council person for that district and had become vice mayor, actually, about 6 months after that bombing. So
I didn't know that.
Yes, I did.
Wow. Now I am impressed.
I jumped right in there fast, didn't I? But I did testify to subcommittees in Congress and to congressional committees in regard to what could we do to improve this. And one of the things that needed to happen back at that time was get the training out to your cities and towns in regions all across America. Make it available. Oklahoma City had been selected a few years before the bombing for the FEMA training, and that's how we knew how to set up an incident command center and how to have a command post and to take care of all of the things that need to go into the command center and the crisis stress debriefings that we did. So we had been lucky to have been chosen to go to the FEMA training in Emmitsburg, Maryland, but many cities don't ever get selected. It was very competitive. So America's top 100 cities had to compete against each other, and they'd just do 1 or 2 trainings a year, and you hardly get 100 cities trained that way. So I was testifying about, let's get the training out regionally. Wichita, Kansas needs training. Georgia needs training. And now we do have a training center in Georgia because of that. They did start doing regional training centers. But that was one of the lessons we learned. And the other thing I would testify about a lot of time would be communications. I told you we had a difficult time in the first few hours after the bombing with communication. And then the government was starting to sell off radio bands to just everybody. And we were saying, hey, reserve some of these for our public safety officials. We need to have public safety radio bands. And communication is so important at the local level when you're trying to handle a huge, huge catastrophe or terrorist incident. And then the main thing that was confusing for Oklahoma City that day was that who's in charge at the federal level? I want you to know, Renee, there were 43 different federal agencies that were being funded for terrorism. So who is in charge? And those agencies would kind of like vie for positions of charge with each other. It was very competitive between them.
Wow.
Oklahoma City finally just said they're in charge.
Wasn't there something that you were involved with about, not only, good enough that, all the cities are getting prepared, but what about rural areas? Certainly they're subject to national disasters or natural disasters just like anyone else. Probably fewer terrorist attacks, but definitely disasters.
Absolutely. And they need the same training. It doesn't matter the size of your city or town. Someone asked me once in Washington, can cities get prepared? And honestly, I don't know that we can ever be prepared enough. Training. We need it. And we need the federal people to coordinate this training and take it out to all the cities and towns that they can get in the region. Regional training for everybody. But, when you've got 43 different federal agencies out there at our government, and they're all vying to get funded every year, and they're all fussing over budget, and they need this for their budget, and they need that for their budget, your cities and towns just are confused about this. Budget's fine, but we need to know who's in charge.
Well, do we know now?
What kind of a message does it tell us at the state and local level and tell our first responders when the federal government can't even coordinate their own efforts?
Wow.
And that's basically what, we... And another thing, we didn't even have a definition of domestic terrorism.
We still don't,
prior
really.
to. Well,
we don't have a law, I would say.
We don't have a law. We have a definition. My committee worked on offering a definition, and then Congress did try to under Bill Clinton, they opened the domestic preparedness office, I think in somewhere after the bombing, that office, when we were saying we need one place we can call. We've got 43 agencies out there in D.C. and we don't know who do we work with. So it's a little better, but it's not there yet. I think we still have lots of agencies in Washington getting funded, which is confusing to our cities and our towns.
So if something like that were to happen in, let's say, Tulsa or Oklahoma City, do they know now who to call?
Well,
do they just call FEMA? Or?
I can't really answer that. I really don't know. I think that your Tulsa or your Wichita or your Denver or whatever city or town it is, they need to be prepared. Your Los Angeles, they need to be prepared to handle it alone. I think the feds will eventually get there. Because now I don't know that we know. FEMA takes a large lead role, but also remember it's a crime scene. So we had the FBI that was in charge in setting up a perimeter for crime scene, but we also had Department of Justice coming out there, and we had different departments. And so the feds need to cooperate with each other, too. The federal response plan needs to be modified, I think, to get those missions of all the different law enforcements at the federal level all on the same page. Oklahoma City and Oklahoma City Police were all on the same page, and we did our job, but it was kind of difficult communicating with all the different agencies that ended up in Oklahoma City, the federal agencies.
Well, I guess, sort of like, what happened on January 6th, what happened on April 19th, 1995 was something that had never, ever happened before in this country. So I guess it's kind of, not surprising that we didn't know quite how to handle it because, even though we should have known, even though we should have been prepared, because I believe, agencies like the FBI and probably like the OSBI and other state bureaus of investigation, they were aware that some of this stuff was bubbling and brewing. I mean, we had already had Waco, so, some of these kinds of things that seemed similar or a similar flavor, and they were all, anti-government and all that. It seems like we should have been a little bit more prepared, but I honestly, I certainly didn't anticipate anything like that. And, I guess maybe a lot of other people didn't either. But now that we know that it is possible, and it indeed has happened once, and, now we've had an insurrection at the Capitol. So it would seem that we would have been so much more prepared. Obviously, there is a lot of debate going on now about what happened on January 6th and why that little brave line of Capitol officers was left alone to defend, against thousands of insurrectionists. We've all watched it on live TV. It happened that way. How?
You mentioned, Renee, something you and I have talked about before, and that is we don't have a law against domestic terrorism. We do have a federal law against international terrorism.
Yes.
We have laws against that, but we don't have a law. And I know laws are punitive and laws punish people. But one time you asked me, what could we do? What could we do to help prevent some of this? I don't know if a strong law with a lot of bite to it would prevent people, or maybe make them think a second longer about, do I really want to go get involved in this?
Right.
I don't know.
I don't know. Now, it's funny, and I don't know that it depends directly on, where you live in the country, but, of course, I live in Southern California. So, yes, it's definitely left-leaning. And, So, most of the people I run into certainly fall into that category, I guess. Not everyone, but everyone that I do know, whether they are a Republican or Democrat, seems to be appalled by what happened. And I'm wondering, is that the same everywhere? Is that just, out here in, airy fairy California, like everybody thinks, but like Katherine, for instance, you just had a huge election there in Georgia where things changed considerably. And of course, resulting in the change in the composition of the United States Senate. Are you aware of generally how people feel about what happened at the Capitol, regardless of who they support politically?
I probably, in some respects, have a very narrow side of this because I am connected to a lot of people who are very, very pro-Democrat, and so I don't know. I live in a county that is dominantly black, and we have black, mayor and commission chairman and so forth and so on. And so I just avoid it myself. I personally find it better for me and for my peace of mind to avoid all the negativity and the anger and the political stuff. And of course, I was very excited about the way the election turned out.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
It pleased me.
I hear you about, kind of not wanting to involve yourself in it. I was just thinking maybe, if you generally picked up something, but you're probably like me. I mean, I think we all are sort of in our own bubbles in a way, just necessarily. So we gravitate toward, like-minded people. And then we know our own family and sort of where everybody stands and everything. So a lot of times I think we don't get the opposing view. And certainly, I don't have any desire to get into, screaming matches with people or name calling or anything like that I see so much of, because I do think it has a negative effect. In fact, it's scientifically proven, when you're around a very negative person, it actually has an effect on you physiologically, just as the opposite is true. We all know people that when they walk in the room, it just sort of lights up the room and everybody starts smiling and laughing and having a good time. It raises our endorphin levels and we feel better. So it's a little difficult for me to understand why people do want to live and be angry all the time, even though I'm sure everybody has plenty to be angry about. But it's
I agree.
Why do you want to feel that way all the time and just keep yourself? It's bad for your health as far as I'm concerned. I think that's also proven.
I will comment with this. I have 3 adult children that are in their 30s, which is in the general terms of things, the millennials. And they are very, very outspoken, and they are very, very involved and active. And if I had an opposing viewpoint to them, I probably would have to keep it quiet. They're going to tell me how wrong I am.
That's funny.
It is, but it's unlike some people who think millennials are this, that, and I listen to them. And I think because they do research it and they do look at what's going on and they research the law and they research everything about it. They're just very, very, very active in that respect. I listen to them more than I listen to what I get from other people because they really don't have their agenda that like the politicians have their agendas. They don't.
That's right. Yeah, I think we've got some good stuff coming up in the future with young people. I have a couple of 20-year-olds in the house still, and it amazes me that they and all their friends about how tolerant they are and how protective of each other they are, how accepting they are about everything, about race, sexual orientation, about, just about mental illness. They're so much more informed. And it's like, to them, mental illness is just another illness. If you had arthritis, then you would treat that. And they don't treat it any differently, which I think is absolutely wonderful because, mental illness is something we've, shoved under the rug for way, way too long and shamed people for it and made fun of people for it. But the kids today, it's just amazing to me how sensitive they are to other people. It blows my mind. So I think we got a good future coming up. I just hope we don't have to wait too long for them to take over because they need to.
Well, I agree. With my children, and part of that is me sitting here patting myself on my back a little bit. I raised them to be open-minded. I raised them to be tolerant and to believe in diversity. That's the kind of lifestyle that they were brought up with. And I would not expect anything else from them because, again, they are our future. And when everything was going on with all of the politicians and everything going on for the campaigns, as far as I'm concerned, the people, and then I turned 70, and it's like, oh my goodness, I'm in the same generation as Trump and Biden. This is awful. but I said, to me, the rest, those of us my age and older, really just need to sit down and shut up because it's time for the younger people to take over. They're the ones that it's going to affect. Everything that's going on with technology is going to be them doing things, not us. We do good to keep up.
That's we sure do.
And so let them, if they feel like, and this is just as an example, I'm not advocating one way or the other, and I would get too political, but if they feel like democratic socialism is the way we need to go, it's up to them to make it happen. Because they're the generation of us baby boomers. They are our children, and so they are the biggest generation out there right now. And it's time that they take their stand. So good, go for
it. Absolutely.
Well,
the whole thing about socialism is a whole nother conversation. I have a little bit of an issue with what people think socialism is. We already have socialism. We have Social Security. We have the armed forces. That is part of socialism. People don't seem to realize that I remember, growing up, the big thing was communist, he's a communist and all that stuff. And so socialism got tangled up in all that negative expression. And so I think it's just a trigger word if people would really look into what it is. And I don't know why people would be so afraid of a national health care system. Why wouldn't it be wonderful for everyone to have free health care?
Well, Renee, Europe has a wonderful system. Now,
yes,
they get great treatment. I had a friend that had a stroke in Italy, and she was in the hospital in Italy for several weeks and had CAT scans every other day or so. And I mean, it barely costs any money, but they do pay higher taxes for that. I mean, it's not just free.
No,
but they have a great system that offers health care for everyone. At reasonable prices.
I've been lucky enough, to be able to spend a little time overseas, and mostly in England and France. And, England, of course, has the national health system. I have a very close friend who's a nurse, and she's been, heavily involved in, the COVID pandemic. And everything is free, dental, everything. And people here always say, oh, yeah, but they have terrible care. They don't. And in France just takes care of you unbelievably. When you have a baby in France, they send a nurse to your house every day for, I want to say 6 months. I could be crazy. It might be 6 weeks, but I think it's 6 months to come by and just help you out a little bit. She'll even wash dishes and things like that. And last summer, I had a friend who was elderly and he was, in his last days. And every single day, a nurse would come by. She would, make sure he had everything he needed, give him his medications, wash the dishes, and do all this. And it was all provided absolutely free. It was so wonderful because he got to stay home and be where he wanted to be because he was under such good care. I would love to see that happen in the United States. I'll take free medical care any day that somebody wants to give it to me. And I think everyone deserves an equal shot at good health. I mean, come on. It really shouldn't be a matter of who can afford the best surgeons and the best doctors. I think good health care ought to be available, just bar none.
Maybe someday.
Maybe someday. Yeah, well, at least we have the Affordable Care Act, and I think a lot of people saw, even people that were against it, there's a lot of people now that are under the Affordable Care Act who don't want to give it up and see that it wasn't the monster that it was portrayed to be by the opposition. So,
well, I worked with people that's really the only health care that they had. Some of these contract workers and people that didn't have income to purchase insurance were able to get health care under the Affordable Health Care Act.
Yeah.
It was a good thing for them.
Yeah.
And I agree, but at the same time, it really needs a lot of work because when you were asking me about hearing things from other people, I heard a lot from people who are on the other side of the coin when it comes to health care, who really got really bad situations because affordable health care did not pay for what they needed. And I'm in a situation being on Medicare, and I see what the first year I was on Medicare, we inherited some money, and so my Medicare payments were really high, and people think that it's free. Well, it's not free, and I had to pay more because we inherited that money that year. And then when I first had a claim, and this is the honest to goodness truth, the charges were like over $8,000, and Medicare paid $14. Now, so certainly doctors and hospitals charge too much, but I was going to a cancer program, and the tests and all of the things that I was going through were expensive because they have to be, and that was what they paid. So it's like, okay, you want me to pay you $500 a month, and you're only going to pay $14? So there's a lot of flaws in the system. Wow. We do need medical care. I had medical care. One of my daughter-in-laws is from Portugal, and I got sick when we went to her home in Portugal, and I got an X-ray and an exam and the medicine, and it only cost me about $20. And I mean, like, I'm diabetic, and so I have to get test strips, and I could get enough tests, like 200 test strips for less than $20, whereas 50 test strips cost me $25. I mean, that the difference in the prices and medicines and the care and even the over-the-counter things that I got for my bronchitis, were really, really good, but I can't get them here. So
right.
So I have a lot of issues. I tried to talk to the candidates about it, and they just forward me on to somebody else, and nobody would actually. So, right. But it's like, okay, here's somebody. I'm somebody, and I'm still going through it because I'm on a watch list being a cancer survivor for 10 years at least. And so I just hit the 8th anniversary. I got 2 more to go because they say it can come back, the kind of cancer that I had. So I deal with medical stuff and care and insurances and Medicare and all that kind of stuff in a way that, some people never have experienced. And so I kind of know the other side of that coin.
Yeah, it sounds like, I'm sure there are many stories like that. And certainly, the Affordable Care Act needs to be, really punched up and expanded and fixed. It's certainly not perfect at all. And a lot of it, was kind of gutted before it got even started. So I think they need to definitely work on that for sure. And yeah, I know, I've been in France. I used to also do tours over there, take tours of people over and show them around. And, we had someone that needed a doctor. And so what you do when you're a foreigner and you need a doctor, you go in a pharmacy and ask them, tell them you need to see a doctor, and they will call the doctor for you. And the doctor wanted to know, do you want to come to my office or do you want me to come to you? And I go, what? I couldn't believe it. He actually offered to come and meet us. And he charged us 20 euros for everything, including the medication, which 20 euros is about, like $23. Unbelievable. I couldn't believe it. We had that happen twice, and both times it was 20 euros.
Well, my friend that was in the hospital in Italy for approximately 3 weeks and CAT scans every other day or so and a very serious stroke, it was only $600 for a 3-week stay.
Wow.
So she was just delighted. And then the doctors here, when she got back to the United States, said they did everything correctly that they should have done for her. She was in great health and just did a little rehab here. So they really took good care of her. She got some real good care. And $600 she felt was very reasonable. If any of us stayed in the hospital in the United States for 3 weeks with
that would
CAT
be
scans going
tens of thousands.
It would.
More than that. I was in the hospital for the flu for 4 days, year before last at Christmas. And because I had Medicare and a good Medigap policy, I didn't have to pay anything. But I saw the bills, and it was about $44,000 for 4 days.
Wow,
$44,000! My goodness.
Yeah.
So she did 3 weeks for $600.
Yeah,
that's unbelievable.
Well, we were talking about prescription costs in the United States, just really ridiculous, which they are, I understand, working on now. They're taking a look at that and seeing what can be done. But I remember when Mom and Dad used to get in their motorhome and go down to Mexico and buy up prescriptions for everybody. And I had this antibiotic gel that I used to have to put on my face. I had rosacea for a while, and it was a small tube, and here I had to pay $75 for it, and my parents would go down and pick up tubes of it for $7 each. So it was exactly the same stuff, the same manufacturer, same ingredients, same everything. They paid, just across the border, $7. We pay $75.
Well, your parents aren't very different from many people in America that do that. They buy their drugs across the border. A lot of Oklahomans in Texas do, just to save money because maybe people on limited incomes and elderly people, they just can't afford some of those drugs.
Oh, no. I remember my mother, when she was still living at home, she would go down to that little center. I think you came down there a couple of times where they would have lunch. The old
senior center.
The senior center. And she would go down there, and she said that, there were people there that would, split their prescriptions in half and not take the therapeutic amount because they couldn't afford, and that also there were people that that was their only meal. They used to get a meal there for 50 cents each day, and that was the only meal that some of those old ladies, were living on their own, would have. I mean, we just don't take care of our people, and we need to.
That's
We
really
do.
sad.
It
That's
is.
really
It is. But I remember her telling me stories about that. And she would just worry about them and feel so bad. But yeah, well, maybe we'll get it together one of these days in America, start looking out for each other and do a little bit better job of that. But, and,
I think that
oh, sorry, go
medicine,
ahead.
as well as just a quick comment, medicine and the hospitalization, all that kind of stuff, as well as racism and all of the subjects that we're dealing with right now, and of course the COVID, is we have to speak up. We have to step forward, and speak up and talk about it. Because people that have never gone through cancer treatment don't have any idea, but if we speak up and say something, it's like, look, just the same thing as just like listening to you ladies about what happened with the Oklahoma City bombing, things that I didn't know about, little details that I had not heard. And it's like, even though it's really hard to hear those things, we need to hear those things. We need to be awake.
That's it.
We need to be aware. That's right. We need to be aware, because what we're talking about, we're seeing more and more people that are using violent methods to satisfy whatever dispute they have with this world, with government, with their communities, and it's not good. So we need to talk about it. We need to be aware, and we need to help others see how we can make changes that are positive.
Absolutely.
And the changes have to come about, and I know, Renee, you're going to laugh because I'm going to sound a little preachy here. It's all about love and kindness, and that's where we have to go with what's going on in the world. We have to turn towards being kind and loving to each other. And, as my example, when I would go to the cancer center, I always, regardless of how I felt, I always tried to smile back to the doctors and the nurses that had such a hard job. They had to watch people die and be sick and be in pain. And so that has been my philosophy, and it still is to give back. That's the kind of person I'm going to be. I'm going to do whatever I can to get them to smile, to make them feel like I appreciate them, to give to them. And that's where we are with everything that's going on.
Yeah.
And I know.
It's a
Renee
wonderful
knows that
philosophy.
I'm
not laughing. I'm not laughing. I couldn't agree more, actually. And it does hearten me to hear the new administration. Actually, they're not afraid to use the word love, and I think that's it. It's like, let's just be kind to each other. Let's just, try to understand as much as we can. It doesn't mean, get run over by someone, but certainly we've got to bring down the noise level and, certainly stand up for what we feel is right and look out for each other, look out for our fellow brothers and sisters, and just, try to be the best people that we can be. Now, I have to admit, there's a lot I do not understand about the forces that were behind, let's say, the attack on, well, certainly on the Oklahoma City federal building, but also on the Capitol building. And it's difficult for me to get my head around it. Although I do think I think there were some different people involved. I think there are people at the very root of these violent actions that plan and want to do just exactly that. And I think that there are other people that just kind of get taken in because it offers them an explanation for all the problems in their lives and someone to lash out at. And so they get taken
Renee,
in. Yeah.
What you're saying is very cult-like.
Well, yeah.
That's exactly how cults operate.
It is. And you know what? I did a theme paper. It was after I was already out here in Los Angeles, and I was working in corporate America, and I was taking some management classes and some other things in college, and in that I took a psychology class and had to do a theme paper, and it could be on anything we wanted that had to do with psychology. So the name of my paper was Cults, Seduction and Induction. Who's vulnerable? And so that was the question that my paper asked. I did a lot of research on it and everything. And in the end, my answer was everyone is vulnerable.
We all are.
Given the right set of circumstances, for that individual, anyone can be vulnerable to that sort of thing. And I know that, mostly we've all been taken in at one time or another about something, whether it was a con man or whether it was betrayal or, someone lying to us or hoaxing us or whatever. I've been famously hoaxed, and, we'll go into that here. But so I understand how, people can be taken in. And even, I guess, as far as some of these really wild ideas, these so-called, QAnon type ideas that are just so outlandish, like all the Democrats are,
drinking the blood of children,
and baby cannibals. Yeah. I mean, it just sounds so crazy. But, I guess if you've been walked down that road, step by step, at some point it does get more extreme, and maybe you just don't notice it. But I think what we need here in America is over.
You hear it over and over, and it's fed into you. We're all from Oklahoma. There's old Indian lore, an old Indian saying about the grandfather speaking to his young grandson. I think it's a Cherokee saying, and the little boy asks about life, and the grandfather says, he says to his grandson, "My son, you have two wolves inside you. One wolf is angry and can be real angry and can be full of hate and can do terrible things. The other wolf inside you is full of love and concern for your fellow man and is a good person." And the little boy asks his grandfather, the little Indian boy says, "Grandpa, how can I, not be that bad wolf?" And the grandfather said, "It all depends on who you feed, which wolf you feed."
Ooh. That is very interesting. Yeah, it's true.
So it's what we're talking about. And so these people are fed this stuff over and over. They believe it. They act it out.
Right. Now, Katherine, aren't you involved in sort of some wonderful work down there in Atlanta or in that area?
Yes, I kind of get to do what I want to at this point in my life, but I am so much into nature and working with the forest and trees and animals and birds. And it used to be that my husband thought that some of the things I would say were so weird, but then he started having those same kind of experiences. A perfect example of something that happened just a couple of weeks ago. He was out working on his chicken house out on our land, and he had been working on the plastic tarp. The wind had blown it off, and he was trying to get it back on and re-secure it. And he heard this really, really loud wind coming through the trees. And right before that, 2 vultures flew over. And so then there came the wind, and it blew away everything he had just done. And then he got a text. He got a text from his brother, who lives in Key Largo, that his cousin who is in his early 60s, is in hospice.
Oh, wow.
And
and the 2 vultures.
The 2 vultures and the wind and everything. And it's like, okay, something's trying to get your attention, Doug. It's time to stop and listen, because that's there. And it's the same, just sometime before that, his uncle and his aunt died 2 weeks apart from COVID. So these messages come to us, these things that, and so that's what I want, what I do. I will take people out in the forest. We can social distance really well. We have probably 3,000 or 4,000 trees, and I take people out and show them how to become one with nature, because if everything is God, then that includes everything in nature. And so I can always feel better. I actually can get more for my health by going out and sitting under the trees than anything I can do.
Well, I'm getting the 2-minute warning, but Katherine, are you like taking people out? Can people contact you to go out, or is it just your friends?
Yes. And I was doing regular sessions, and then COVID hit, and so everything has been put on hold. But I'm ready, and I've actually had some of my friends contact. I need to go. When can we go?
How do people find you?
Well, they find me, of course, on Facebook and by referral from other people. That's the main way I do it. I do have cards, but mostly on Facebook at this point.
Right. Well, if anybody's interested in taking one of Katherine's nature sessions, then get in touch with me, and I'll put you in touch with her, or find her on Facebook. It's Katherine Wheelus Dannels, Dannals. Am I pronouncing that right? Dannels?
Yes, that's ELS, Dannels.
Oh, Dannels. Okay.
Correct.
All right.
I'll go out on the limb here. I'm also very much into shamanic studies and my Native American heritage from being in Southeast Oklahoma. And I explained this to a friend of mine recently. The real name for Choctaws was not Choctaw, but Choctaw was because Choctaws like to talk. We're Choctaw.
Oh, that's funny. I love it. Well, I grew up in the Choctaw Nation, and so did Ann. All right. Yes. We're gonna have to cut it here, ladies. I really appreciate you both being here. Ann, thanks so much for sharing, that inside information on the Oklahoma City bombing. And it really has been on my mind lately.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay. I hope you come back sometime. Thank you, Katherine, for sharing your personal stories. Much appreciated.
Thank you for inviting.
You're welcome. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Take care of yourselves. Stay safe. Get that vaccine if you can. All right. Take care, everybody. Good night.